Venus and star blessings. Welcome back, everybody, and happy Venus Day. Today's Friday for me in the Southern Hemisphere anyway, and maybe when you watch this, it'll be Friday for you. So I thought it's a perfect day to talk about Venus because it is Friday, and Friday, of course, is ruled by Venus. So today I'm going to talk about the Gemini Venus star point coming up, and I'm going to predominantly speak to it hopefully in a way that's going to be helpful for you guys on a personal level, as opposed to focusing on the collective components of it, the collective themes, going into like broader streams of it. I think it's probably more useful to think about it from the point of view of how we can work with this energy personally ourselves. And there is, there are various streams, that there are various ways of looking at this cosmic clock, because that's what it is. It's a cosmic clock. Venus, Sun, Earth forming a particular alignment over an 8-year period 5 times, which we know as a Sun-Venus conjunction, is basically a pattern of a cosmic clock, things just kind of moving very slowly, just like a cosmic clock in the background. So that's what a Sun-Venus star point is. It is a conjunction between the Sun and Venus, but the actual alignment occurs between Sun, Venus, and Earth. And that's a very important point, perhaps, to start with, just from the point of view of perhaps giving some a way of thinking about what do I look for with this star point? What does it actually mean? And yeah, where to start is with the fact that it's the alignment between Sun, Venus, and the Earth, because that basically shows us the energy is the Sun, which is spirit, the light, the spirit and light of you, your spirit energy, coming through Venus. Venus is a magnetic principle which draws and attracts everything she wishes to attract, sometimes for better or for worse. But however, she is a magnetic force, right? So when she gets close to the Sun and forms this Cazimi conjunction, as it's known, which is an Arabic term, which literally means in the heart of the Sun, she takes the Sun's light and she emanates it through her radiance, her beauty, her heartbeat, her love. And she basically integrates it and manifests it on the Earth plane. That's why it's important to address that this conjunction, called a Venus star point, or a Cazimi, or Sun-Venus conjunction, whatever language you want to use, it is an alignment between Sun, Venus, and Earth. And that's literally the symbolic meaning to it. So that's just a starting point, okay? Now, the second thing would be, this light flicks on and off. Anyway, never mind. I think it's just spirits talking to me. Someone said I've got electrical problems in my apartment. That may be true, but I look at things a little bit differently. Anyway, so this Venus star point is going to be an evening star, right? We are coming out of a morning star phase, which occurred in August last year, okay? And that was the Leo Venus morning star. So we're transitioning from a morning star Venus, which means we've been seeing Venus as a morning star on the eastern horizon every morning the last 8 months or so, depending on where you are on the Earth relative to her visibility and invisibility. That's another thing we're going to be exploring a little bit today, which comes from traditional Babylonian teachings. And it is basically, very specifically, it is Venus's heliacal rising and settings, meaning her appearance and disappearance, which is an important factor which very rarely gets addressed. And the main person who addresses this and who's worked on this is Roman Kolev. So I always give credit to him, because I've learned so much from the very little time I've spent with him, because I've got his program and I've got a little bit of his material, bought one of his books, and I'm slowly, just drawing out this just this incredible deep, deep wisdom from Babylonian astrology. So we've got that, which I'm going to go to in a moment as well. Just bringing it back to basics, okay? So we understand what the alignment is. It's Sun, Venus, Earth, okay? It rotates every 9 months from a morning star to an evening star. That it can never be any other way. Like you'll never have 2 morning Venus star points in a row or 3 evening Venus star points in a row. You will always have one and then the other consecutively, right? That cycle never changes. To keep it very simple again, it's probably better to look at it from the point of view of this 8-year cycle, where 5 Venus star points will occur during this 8-year period. And it's really interesting. It's so complicated. This is so big, this subject, but I'm just trying to keep it really, really simple for today. But there's 10 Venus star points happening because we've got morning stars and evening stars, right? Anyway, I don't want to complicate it. Back to the simplicity of it. It's interesting because it's in Gemini, and we can get so lost with Gemini from the point of view of overload of data, overload of information. And the most common word, an appropriate word for Gemini is, oh, that's so interesting. Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. And I'm interested in this and I'm interested in that. I'll get to that part in a moment because that's going to be an important factor in this as well. So this Gemini Venus star point, by the way, came onto the wheel, the Venus star point wheel, in 1964. Okay, so if you were born post 1964, you will have a Gemini Venus star point on your pentagram wheel. Everybody has the pentagram wheel, 5 Venus star points from the point of view of when they were born, right? We all have them. And many of us in, various generations will have the exact same ones, right? Because these Venus star points move backwards in the wheel. That's one thing to also remember. They move backwards in the wheel, and they move incredibly slowly, okay? Like 1 degree every 8 years, 1 to 2 degrees every 8 years. So if you were born post 1964, this Gemini Venus star point is part of your own Gemini Venus star point in your pentagram. If you were born before 1964, this Gemini Venus star point was in Cancer. So when you look at your pentagram, if you were born before 1964, you'll see that this Gemini Venus star point we're talking about today was actually in Cancer. But it's the same Venus star point, it's just continuing in its journey, meaning that it got to a point where it transitioned out of Cancer into Gemini. So moving out of Cancer into Gemini, it's going backwards in the zodiac, isn't it? Because that's what these Venus star points do. They move backwards. If you were born before 1964, this Gemini Venus star point is your Cancer Venus star point. So you're still looking at it, you're still working with it. It's just now in a different sign as it's progressed through your life. If you're born post 1964, then it's your Gemini Venus star point on the wheel. So whether you were born before 64 or after 64, this particular Gemini Venus star point is at 14 degrees of Gemini, which occurs on the 4th of June. So the other thing you need to look at is, where is this Venus star point in my birth chart? Where is 14 degrees of Gemini in my birth chart? Before I unpack some things around that, I just also want to address that we are transitioning from a morning star to an evening star. So it's a completely different divinity, a completely different goddess that we are looking at. And that draws more from the Babylonian teachings as well. The evening star is a very different vibration, a very different goddess, a very different energy, a very different experience and embodiment of Venus and the Venus star point from morning star to evening star. Morning star is the warrior goddess, which corresponds to Pallas Athena, and it is very much about the action we take externally out in the world with our own life. It's a very bold energy. It's very direct. It's very in your face, if you like. It's very action orientated and very earth orientated. The morning star is when Venus is retrograde. So the retrograde cycle, from an astronomical perspective, means that Venus is closest to us from our position here on the Earth. So she's been in this phase since August last year, and it's been a pretty intense vibration, pretty intense energy. We know there's a war going on. There's always some kind of war going on, but this is very extreme what's going on, which is still going on, which is still very extreme. So, you know, there's all of that. But and as I did a video, when was it? It was 10 days ago, according to what it says on my channel. So I did a video, 42 minutes, where I spoke about Venus transitioning. Venus is now in the underworld because she's transitioning from her morning star phase to her evening star phase. And very, very simply put, I mean, I'd encourage you to watch that video if you haven't, but very simply put, just to recap, let me just share my screen and just bring okay, so I showed this in that video that I did a couple of weeks ago, and so just to recap, okay, this is Ruman's graph. So again, we're giving credit to Ruman for this work. This is one of my favorite graphs ever that's ever been created, of the cycle of Venus, morning star to evening star, and all the associated divinities, her passages where she transitions, and so on and so forth. We could talk about this for hours. There's so much information in this. But basically, just to recap and just to keep it very simple, right up here at the top where it says Venus invisible, and where you see the Gorgon Medusa, and also the associated divinities such as Persephone, Ereshkigal, Ishara, this is the zone we have been in for the past few weeks, and we are still in, because Venus has not been reborn yet. So if you look over to the left-hand side, my left-hand side, you can see it says EF, the letters EF. This is Venus's first appearance as an evening star, right? Now, this will happen after the conjunction on June 4th. There's a conjunction on June 4th, the exact conjunction of the Sun and Venus, which is the Cazimi in the heart of the Sun, which means several different things, and I'll get back to that in a moment. But I just want to remind us that we are still in this dark zone. We're still in this underworld zone of Venus. And even when she forms her conjunction to the Sun, she will not be visible in the sky. So there's two very distinct ways of working with this and understanding it, okay? But just visually, just remember that we are still in this zone here, which is the longest period of Venus's invisibility versus the opposite point down here. See how there's a smaller highlighted area? That means that she's invisible for a much shorter period of time on this side. This is when she's transitioning out of evening star into morning star, which is not what's happening now. What's happening now is we are transitioning from morning star to evening star, which is her longer period of invisibility. Okay, so that was just a small recap of where we are. Let me just get my thoughts together. I'm still not 100% well, by the way. This sinus infection is, yeah, it's really detoxifying many things in my life. Okay. So where is the Gemini Venus star point in your birth chart? Where is 14 degrees? Now, you may have this 14 degrees located in an area of your chart where there's not much happening. You don't have anything in that sign. You don't have anything else going on in that house. And then you might be thinking, well, what does it mean in this house? Well, you need to understand what the house symbolizes. First of all, that's your basic, foundation. What does this house mean? If it's in my 11th house, what does the 11th house mean, right? That's where you take your the indication from. the significators and the meaning, right, of the Venus star point in the 11th house, for instance. The 11th house is a good house, by the way, because it's the house of the guardian daemon. It's a very, very positive house. Even in ancient Babylonian astrology, it's considered a really good house as well. Or is it in the 9th house? Is the Venus star point in your 9th house? Again, the 9th house, although in some medieval astrology, the 9th house would be considered what they call a cadent house, which it is said that cadent houses are not strong. But I don't think it's as simple as that. In Babylonian astrology, for a star, the 9th house is one of the strongest houses because it forms a trine to the ascendant. And that's a very powerful thing. So if the Venus star point was in your 9th house, well, you must understand what 9th house matters speak to, and so on and so forth, right? So understand the basic energy of that house. If there's nothing in that house, is that Venus star point making any aspects to anything else in your chart? Is it making a trine to something in your chart? Is it making a square to something in your chart? A sextile, an opposition? You know, the main aspects. Obviously, you need to understand aspects to understand what I've just said, and most of you who watch me do. And if you don't, I'm teaching astrology at the moment, and I'm actually in my 2nd series. So reach out if you want to learn with me, if you want to study with me. I'm actually going to do a short little video on explaining as to why it would be valuable for you to study with me. Because there's still a lot of people that don't really know me, that don't really know the full extent of what I offer in my classes. So anyway, that aside, I'll probably do a little video just to explain a little bit about myself and my teaching style and so on and so forth. So look at the hard aspects. Conjunction, square, opposition. Is there anything going on there with this Venus star point? If there's nothing happening on that level, then the next thing you can go to, which I always go to anyway, even if it's making these obvious aspects, I will still look at what I'm about to say now, which is midpoints. Midpoints, I never hear people talking about midpoints, and I think that's a great loss, because midpoints are extremely potent points, both from a natal perspective and also from a transiting perspective. That is, you can have a transiting body moving over a particular midpoint in your chart, and bam, something really significant can be highlighted or activated or embodied. And if you're not looking at midpoints, you will miss that. So midpoints are very, very powerful. So house, where is 14 degrees of Gemini? Look at the main aspects, look at the midpoints. And from those evaluations and analysis, you should be able to start to draw a little picture for yourself as to what this Gemini star point energy means for you, right? Because it is going to mean something very specific and different for all of us, even though it's a Gemini Venus star point, and Gemini is Gemini and its ruler is Mercury, and obviously it has that level to it, which is all about the written and spoken word. It's all about learning, studying, and communication. It's all about networking. It's all about juggling different ideas. You know, it's multiplicity. It's a multiple of things. It's a mutable sign. Gemini can flip and change a lot. It can get lost in the world of data, information, meaningless information, because meaning is Sagittarius, which is the opposite sign to Gemini. So these are, you know, worthy of considering when you're looking at the Gemini Venus star point. Also, you know, this could be your main Gemini Venus star point, meaning there is a pentagram that we draw in our chart, superimposed in our chart when we were born. And in that pentagram, we could have Gemini at the head of the pentagram, meaning that that's our main Venus star point. The head of the pentagram is the leader, if you like, of your pentagram, relative to just thinking about it from a Venus star point perspective. Because in Babylonian astrology, it's very, very different. It has very different significators. It has just a very different approach. And if you really want to learn more about that, I encourage you to go to Rumen and speak to him and access his webinars and so on and so forth, because he goes into all of that very thoroughly and deeply. Or you can come to me for a Venus star point reading, because I use Rumen's program and I can look at Venus's heliacal phases for you. We can look at, for example, sorry to sidetrack, but this is important. When you were born, was Venus visible or was she invisible? Huge difference if she was and if she wasn't. When will she appear after your birth? How many days after your birth, which equates to months, and then another technique will equate it to years. These are all really important specific details that relate to events surrounding all things Venus. Venus is a very important divinity and a very important portal energy, archetypal existence in our life, because it is the principle of love. She is the principle of love. Love makes the world go round. Everything is connected to the source of love. So she's primary, she's huge. So let me think now, where was I? Okay, so the conjunction occurs on June the 4th. As I said, look at where it's going to be in your house. Which house is it going to be in your birth chart? Is it aspecting anything in your birth chart? Are there any prominent midpoints that you could pay attention to? The midpoint will give you extra information and may just nail something else that you otherwise couldn't see. So let me just show you, for instance, what I'm talking. I'm going to share my screen first. If you're using Solar Fire, this is the way to do it. So just pretend this is your birth chart. This is actually the chart of the Sun-Venus conjunction occurring on June 4th, but in Australia it'll be June 5th. So if you're using Solar Fire, imagine this is your birth chart. If you're not sure where to access midpoints and so forth, this is where you do it. So you just go to reports, this window comes up, go to this section here where it says midpoint listing. Okay, click, oops, not that one, midpoint listing. Okay, click that. And it brings up this window here that you see. And this is just showing you all the midpoints between all the pairs of planets. But an easier way to do it is to go further down to the next section where you just look at the order of the zodiac. So for example, well, this is the chart of the Sun-Venus conjunction. So it's a little bit hard to look at it from the point of view of what I'm trying to demonstrate, but then again, not really. So you'd go to the Gemini column and you would try to find what is the closest to 14 degrees. And you want to stick to really tight orbs here, like 2 or 3 degrees, I would say. So anything 2 or 3 degrees either side of 14 Gemini could be very important, could be a very important midpoint. Then you'd go to Sag, because Sag is the opposite sign. So it's the opposite midpoint. And I'd go as far as looking at squares and conjunction, square, and opposition. So what's square? Virgo. So you'd go to Virgo midpoint section. Is there anything close to 14 degrees of Virgo, meaning that's squaring the Gemini midpoint? So that's basically how you do that. And then you just look at what the combination is. If you're looking at, let's just say there was a midpoint there between the Gemini Venus star point was at the midpoint of your Sun and ascendant, let's just say, as an example. Before you get too carried away and pay heaps of attention to that, in order to work with that, you need to have an absolute accurate time to the second, because that's a ascendant Sun midpoint, meaning if your ascendant is not accurate, that Sun ascendant midpoint is not accurate either. This is where time of birth becomes absolutely crucial. And again, just a reminder, I do rectify charts with my mentor at the moment, I'm passing it all over to him because I just don't have the headspace or time to do any of that. So if you want your chart rectified, reach out and let me know, okay? Because here's another example as to why your time of birth needs to be 100% accurate. So let's now look at perhaps some of the interpretation. Well, coming out of a morning star to an evening star, that transition unto itself is huge because we're coming out of Pallas Athena and we're going into Aphrodite. Literally, the morning star is Pallas Athena, the warrior goddess, and the evening star is the love goddess, Aphrodite. It's a much softer energy. Now, it's so fascinating because the very popular saying by Hermes Trismegistus, as above, so below, as within, so without, as the source of the universe, is just a very powerful and literal way of describing literally life, everything we experience, everything we see, within and without, above and below. Because the evening star, which the conjunction occurs on June 4th, Venus will not appear until July, sometime in July, and it changes, the date changes based on one's latitude. And that's a tricky one to figure out because there's no program other than Rumans that actually nails it. But roughly speaking, if you're in Melbourne, Australia, she appears on I think it's the 3rd of July. And if you're close to New York latitude, USA, it's not far off that. It's about 4th of July, I think, something like that. In any case, think about it like this. It's a month later after the actual conjunction, meaning, and you can observe this with your own eyes, that astronomical phenomena reflects what's going to be happening here on the Earth. Meaning when Venus is invisible, which she will be even after she forms her conjunction, she still hasn't literally, she hasn't experienced the full rebirth yet. She's absorbing, the sun's rays, the sun's light, and she's taking that energy, as it were, preparing to bring it to us, to bring it to the Earth once she is seen in the night sky, because that's what an evening star is, and that's what this sun conjunction at 14 degrees of Gemini on the 4th of June will be, Venus starting to appear in the evening sky. So her appearance it's very, very fascinating to me because the evening star speaks so much to a softer energy, a softer approach, a more mysterious, secretive, it's Aphrodite, it's the love goddess, it's the goddess that takes us into the realm of romance, it's a much softer energy. And when we see her appear in the sky, we will notice that she appears very, very slowly, she just kind of slowly creeps in, right? Just literally slowly creeps into the night sky. Whereas the Venus morning star, which is Venus rising on the eastern horizon, when she comes in, she just comes in like a full powerhouse. Like she just literally emerges, bang, like a diamond, sparkling like a diamond, right, before the sun rises. Very bold. Evening star, she just comes in slowly and gradually. That's why she's the Aphrodite love goddess. So that's one of the main differences between them, even astronomically, as we're viewing it. So what Ruman says is that the evening star phase people, for example, people born under the evening star phase, will appear in your life in that same sort of way, in the same way she appears astronomically. So those people will come into your life very slowly. You won't even know where they've come from. They've gradually made their way into your life, as it were. Whereas a Venus morning star, she just comes right up in your face, bang, she's there. There's transparency. With the evening star, it's not transparent. It's very, you could almost say it's a bit blurry. You don't know where she's come from. It's just so fascinating because it's literally what happens in the sky as well, as Venus appears as a morning star or an evening star. So we're moving out of the intense, rush, dynamic, earth-based goddess Venus, warrior goddess, goddess of war, into this more mystical, romantic, artistic, creative, all the Venusian side of Venus that's much softer, because the evening star has feminine qualities to her, whereas the morning star has masculine qualities to her. And that again shows us just the difference between the energy of a morning star versus an evening star. So we're leaving the masculine energy of Venus with her armor, Pallas Athena, with her armor, her shield, with the Gorgon Medusa on her shield, her spears, ready to attack or defend. And then she's died and gone into the underworld for quite a few weeks now. And that means having to have released and let go of a lot of things in our life, whether that's emotionally, psychologically, physically, spiritually. It's a difficult time to reestablish relationships and love. There's death going on. It's the ending of things. There's deaths going on. There could be material that's come to your awareness, information, things that have come to your understanding during this period that you weren't aware of before. That actually happened to me in a Venus way, through Venus Matters. Had to do with Venus. It was women. Very interesting, actually. Things are not as they appear. Very rarely, actually. So moving into Venus's appearance, which occurs in July, Gemini Venus star point, it is the goddess of love that we are moving into. It's that realm, it's that energy, it's that portal. It is about romance. It is about love. It is about beauty. It is about harmony. It is about the artistic, aesthetic realm, the more soft, feminine approach to everything, and especially all things Venus, right? So that's another point to consider. Also, when Venus does appear, it's in the tropical sign of Cancer, actually. And it is in 19 degrees of Cancer tropical is where Cancer appears, Venus appears in Cancer, 19 degrees Cancer tropical, which is a feminine sign. So if we're thinking about it from the tropical view, that's a plus, because Venus's appearance in a feminine sign is supposed to be quite auspicious, especially as an evening star, which is her natural domain. It's a feminine, the evening star is a feminine principle, has a feminine energy. So appearing in a feminine sign really sort of amps up, if you like, the qualities of the feminine through the blessings of the heart of Venus. So that's a good thing. But in the Babylonian zodiac, she appears at the 23rd degree of Gemini. Gemini is a masculine sign, so it depends how you want to look at it, right? Okay, and relative to her appearance, actually, as an evening star, the strongest signs are actually Taurus, Pisces, and Cancer. They're the strongest signs of her appearance as an evening star. And even though Scorpio is a feminine sign, it's not as strong as these other feminine signs, because Scorpio has that dark side to it, the snakes and the dungeons and the underworld and the death and, all that sort of stuff. Okay, so let's actually just have a little look-see at the chart, just the basic chart of, why is it showing that there? Okay, the one-dimensional chart is what I mean by basic. So here's the cazimi between Sun Venus, the conjunction, which occurs June 4th, June 3rd, depending on whether you're in southern or northern hemisphere. So there they are there. So what rules Gemini? It's Mercury. And Mercury is in his own domicile in Gemini. So that's, I think, an added strength, if you like, relative to this Gemini Venus star point. The Mercury is not close enough to be conjunct the Sun Venus conjunction. But then again, if you looked at it through the evolutionary lens, that would be close enough to be a conjunction. And in sidereal astrology, a conjunction can occur between two planets just being in the same sign. They call that a conjunction. So how do you want to look at it? You see, it depends on how one looks at it. In any case, Mercury is in his domicile, which means he's in a very strong position. Jupiter recently was reborn in his morning star phase. And Jupiter just recently entered Gemini in the sign that Venus forms her conjunction to the Sun with, in the sign that Venus creates this Venus star point, as it were. Oh, actually, before I go further into this, just another thing I forgot to mention. The evening star phase, which is the one we are going into, which is feminine, as I said, it's the love goddess, Aphrodite. It's a softer energy. It is much more connected to the sensual and softer elements of Venus, romance, love, beauty, art, all of that sort of stuff. And the direct phase, which is this phase here, Venus-Sun conjunction, this is a direct phase of Venus as opposed to Venus being retrograde. The retrograde Venus is the morning star. I know it can get a little bit confusing. It does take a while to get your head around this information. But once you start to get the hang of it, you learn how to understand the language, because that's what astrology is. It's a language, and a very unique one. But anyway, the point being that the direct phase, which is actually Venus being furthest away from us relative to our position here on Earth. When she's a morning star, she's closest to the Earth. That's why she's rising there on the eastern horizon as a morning star just before the sun, and is bright like a sparkling diamond. And we can feel her and literally see her. She's so close. And when she's conjunct the sun in her direct phase, which is this one here, it means that she's furthest from the Earth. She's on the other side. And that's why even when you look at her appearing in the night sky, she appears very, very slowly, like one step at a time, very, very slowly. She gradually just kind of starts to, create this little twinkle, and then she becomes brighter as she continues to move in that cycle. But we get this sense that she's in this kind of like, it's almost like a mystical realm. She's the goddess of the night in this phase, it's the nocturnal energy, the evening star, because it is nocturnal. She is shining in the night sky, so it has that nocturnal feel to it as well. And another thing we can add to that is that the direct phase is also considered to be the full phase, like a full moon. Whereas the morning star phase corresponds to the new moon, if we are talking about the cycle of the sun-moon cycle, because you can look at the Sun-Venus conjunction in the same way. You can see them when they're in their new phase conjunction, crescent, opposition, so on and so forth. At this point, she's actually in a full phase. So full phase is a Libran phase, right? when the sun and moon are opposite each other, that's called a full moon. A full moon is about illumination, and a full moon phase itself, regardless of what pair of planets you are looking at, is actually a Libran energy or a Libran portal or significator, right? So we have Venus as an evening star in her full moon phase, which is a Libran type of phase. And once again, those energies very much connect to the divinity of Aphrodite, which is about love and relationships. So there's another layer to that. And also, the other thing to consider with this is this cycle began in 2020 when the Sun and Venus were together in Gemini again, but Venus was retrograde, so it was the morning star cycle, okay? So 4 years later, she gets to the midway point. Remember, it's an 8-year cycle. This is the middle point, and in the middle point, a lot of things can happen. A lot of things can flourish. A lot of things can open up. A lot of things can be activated, even though it started in 2020. So another thing to consider perhaps would be, was there anything significant that Venus activated for you during the morning star phase, the Gemini morning star phase back in 2020? And so at this point, it might not be that you start new things necessarily. It might be, but it might not be. It might be the continuation of seeds flourishing at this time relative to what began for you in 2020. I know it is for me, and it's all actually all the teachings on Venus. That's what it is, because the last 4 years I've been going 100% full speed into Venus on every single level. You know, it's like there's been this thirst for Venus and her mysteries and her wisdom and her knowledge, you know. And so I've gone into every single area that I can, and I've tried to deepen my understanding and wisdom and knowledge about her and about this unbelievable cycle, which can expand to post 1,000 years, by the way, the Sun-Venus cycle. We're just looking at the smaller cycle here, the 8-year cycle. So when I look at it, for me, that's what it was. And it's in my 5th house, so it's me expressing it all, you know, expressing it creatively, because I feel that the learning that I've been integrating has been a creative process for me. Venus is about creativity. 5th house is how you express yourself, simply put. So at this middle point, it could just be things opening up for you even more and flourishing further relative to what began in 2020. So another point to consider, because in 4 years' time, we're going to be back into the Gemini Venus star point, but it'll be the Gemini morning star, so the cycle starts again. So that's another way to think about it. Relative, going back to this Mercury Jupiter business down here, which I think is important in this chart, because Mercury is the ruler of the Venus star point. It has a very wide conjunction to it, as does Jupiter for that matter. And, you know, Mercury being in his domicile obviously is a great strength. There's no question about it. And I guess the beauty of the Sun-Venus conjunction in its most purest, holistic, in the cosmic heartbeat that it is, because that's what it is, it's the cosmic heartbeat. At its purest form, it will flourish in the heart, the matters that do connect to Gemini. And let's not forget, from an esoteric perspective, Gemini corresponds to, well, Gemini is ruled by Venus in esoteric astrology. So if we bring a little bit of that wisdom into this, that just adds more of the perspective, if you like, of Gemini corresponding to unity of the whole, right? In other words, Gemini is the brothers and sisters, and it's the brothers and sisters of all souls on the earth. And esoteric astrology is always about unifying the personality and the soul, creating this alignment so that we can wake up to the truth, which is love. So at that purest level, you know, this is a wonderful energy. At the point of the conjunction, which occurs June 3rd, 4th, or 4th, 5th rather, that can be a really, I think that should be like a private time where we either do a particular practice or a particular offering to Venus for ourselves in our life from the point of view of deep love. So I see that as a private thing, personal private thing, because Venus is still invisible at this point. And when Venus, or when a planet is invisible, the matters pertaining to that planet are operating in a different realm. They're not operating on the physical. So when the conjunction occurs, Venus is still invisible. That's why I'm saying the Sun-Venus conjunction is a beautiful vibration energetically and spiritually. And what we can do with that on that day, I think, is a personal and private embodied experience. That could be a meditation. It could be dancing. For me, it's going to be dancing, probably some meditation too, but definitely some dancing. Because dancing for me is like breathing, and it's the thing other than God's language, the stars, that brings the most joy to my heart and to my soul, music and dance. Hands down, always has been, always will be that for me. The point I'm really trying to make here is that some people might think, oh, the conjunction is occurring on June 4th, 5th, so I should be looking at that day. I should be looking at what's going to happen to my life in that day. Not so, because Venus is invisible. Number two, relative to that point, when an alignment occurs, because there are many different alignments occurring all the time, but when an alignment occurs, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be a miraculous life changer for you. There's a sequence and a series of things that generally line up when pretty big shifts happen in our life. So there's going to be a lot of hoo-ha, right? A lot of hoopla about the Sun-Venus conjunction, because it is like at the purest, core level, it is a beautiful energy, but there's going to be a lot of hoo-ha about it, and it's important not to get caught up in the hype and understand everything that I've said today, right from the beginning of where is it in your chart. Is it your phase? Were you born as an evening star or a morning star? Is this your Cancer, Gemini, Venus star point that's transitioned into Gemini? Is it aspecting any planets in your chart? Is it aspecting any midpoints? And if you don't know how to do that, come to me. That's what I'm here for. That's what I do. We can do it together. Now, the next section I want to go into, outside of the purest, beautiful components of this, feminine energy, nocturnal energy, Aphrodite, divinity, goddess of love, beauty, all those wonderful things, the embodiment that we ourselves can, participate in on the day of the conjunction. Just understand her visibility is not for a month later. So all things pertaining to Venus being reborn in this beautiful divine goddess of love, and everything that entails for the next 9 months, will not really begin for us until she appears in the sky. That doesn't come from my personal opinion. That comes from ancient Babylonian teachings, from priests who were astrologers, who would record everything in the sky 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 years ago. The thing that I want to also perhaps address is that Jupiter is in its detriment here. So I'll say that that's important, and it's not the greatest thing, even though it is a benefic, and of course Venus is a benefic. It's not going to be completely disastrous or the end of the world, that's for sure. But here's a very simple analogy of a benefic in detriment, such as Jupiter. And this will be very applicable in this Venus Gemini star point vibration, particularly because Gemini's just ingressed, Jupiter's just ingressed into Gemini. And I need to have a sip of water. And we'll be there for the next 12 months. So, you know, Jupiter's holding that vibration of this Sun-Venus conjunction as well. And that's actually a blessing in a way, because Jupiter is in detriment in Gemini, so that's not the greatest thing. But the fact that the Sun-Venus conjunction occurs in Gemini, I think it brings through the potential, at least, you know, for something more pure to come through. But where we can trip ourselves up on that, and very easy to do, especially in this day and age with this technological insanity, because it is insane. I literally, if we want to go to mainstream, not mainstream, well, I suppose mainstream, but more of a collective issue, I found that there is a website you can go to. It's called Face Check ID. And they're pretty clever, very fucking clever, actually, whoever created this, because all you need to do is you just put in a person's name, and this app, and here it is here. You see that? This app will find that person on every single place on the internet they are to be found. So it's a real invasion of privacy, in other words. But the way they've done it is, when you put a person's name in, they'll show you, for example, if a person's on Facebook, they'll show you, there they are on Facebook. It shows you the picture of the person. And then it says, but they are also in, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever, in a number of other places. But if you want to see that, you have to pay. So it's pretty fucking clever, whoever came up with this. But what an absolute invasion of privacy. This is, you know, it's another level from that point of view of that digital ID insanity that they're, you know, trying to bring in, which I think has just about been passed here in Australia, actually. And yeah, so we're going to see, I think we're going to see a lot of problems on that stream of things. That's more the mundane collective issues relative to the Gemini factor in this, right? And because Jupiter in Gemini is in detriment, what it can point to, this is what I was going to say before, is here's an analogy. An opportunity presents itself, Jupiter, from a Gemini perspective, because Jupiter is in Gemini and the Sun-Venus conjunction is happening in Gemini. And it could be two opportunities. That would be likely the case because it's Gemini. So you're kind of humming and hawing, do I go for this one or do I go for that one? And you might go for both, or you might just flip and change your mind altogether. There's that side of it too. Or there could be multiple of multiples and your brain's just scattered. You're not sure what the hell to do. Anyway, finally you decide to go for this particular thing because it seems too good to be true. And usually when something is too good, appears too good to be true, it's exactly that. It's BS, it's false. So always remember that, I think. But the analogy would be you go for that opportunity because it just seems so kind of grand and great, Jupiter, and you get that opportunity and you invest yourself in something, or you work with something, or something's given to you, could be in exchange of something else. And then when you get it, you end up realizing that it was not worth it in the end. That's what happens with Jupiter being in detriment, because it experiences some type of loss and some type of fall. It can be a fall from grace for some people. And don't forget, Gemini is the archetype, very, simply put, that certainly corresponds to the splitting and the dividing of things in the world of the personality. It's that division of black and white, good and bad, right and wrong, this community versus that community, this way of teaching versus that way of teaching. It's splitting everything up. Gemini is the archetype that splits everything up. So it can be the dark and the light that can come through in such a severe way with certain things that people are looking at or are engaging with as well. And I think we can get very lost in that world of Gemini, with Jupiter in Gemini being, there'll be such an influx of, more of an influx of information that's going to come through. Look at this digital Face ID bullshit that I just showed you, right? That's Gemini. That's pure Gemini. Mercury Gemini. But it's an invasion of people's privacy. So we can get lost in the Gemini data scheme of things. Think about it. Jupiter wasn't in Gemini, or Jupiter was in Gemini, I'm sorry, 12 years ago. 12 years ago, the internet and the world was very, very different to what it is today. So we're going to see something very different. And we're going to see amazing things as well, because Jupiter picks up that trine to Pluto. And Jupiter trine Pluto is one of the freaking most amazing aspects, actually. So there's a lot of good that can come out of this, but we just have to put it into context of everything. We have to understand we live in a world of duality. There is light and dark. There is black and white. There are shades of grey as well, of course. There's different ways of looking at things and so on and so forth. And it's going to be up to each of us, to really discern, to use that inner guidance, intuitive system that God gifted us with, to intuit and discern the rubbish from the truth. Jupiter is about truth, and Gemini is about data and information, but it can also be just people lying and twisting information. And there's so much of that going on the internet. As I've mentioned in a previous video, and most of you who commented were in agreement. I think if you're not in agreement with that, then I don't know what reality you're living in. It is, so obvious that it's like there's a social media is going through, well, it's been going through this narcissistic passage for a while, and it's going through some schizoid defragmentation of sorts with God, it's so hard to even articulate. It's just a process that's taking people's energy rather than giving people energy. It's taking it. It's invasive. It's hijacking people's energy. And Jupiter in Gemini can really, expand that in a big way to our detriment if we allow it. That's why discernment through our intuitive internal faculties are so important in this process, because we can get lost in a sea of information that leads us to doors or pathways or information that's certainly not valuable or not even correct or not even truthful. And Jupiter, you will know, Jupiter, whatever it touches, it expands it. It doesn't shrink it. Saturn shrinks things and Jupiter expands things. That's a fact. So we're going to have to be very, very careful with our own energy and how it's been hijacked by what we are allowing ourselves to tune into, very simply put. But going back to the Venus star point, I think the best way to look at this is what started in 2020. If anything, follow through on that, working with that at this point in your life, and take the meaning from the house location that it's in and so forth. Any aspects and things like that are happening. Is this your phase? Are you an evening star phase? And things like that. Remember about her reappearance, which takes place in July. And whatever this brings from its purest level, it will be something to do with Gemini. So it will be more knowledge and more learning, but we can take it from a a more pure level, from the heart level. We've got to make sure with the Venus Sun Cazimi conjunction, that's the divine goddess Venus, who's been in the underworld, basically, you know, she's gone through the seven spheres of dying in each one of those spheres, right? And in the end, she gets hung on a hook by her sister, Reshki Girl, like a piece of meat. So we've gone through a really intense, we still are, passage of this death process within ourselves. So when she's reborn, we can start to give birth to new things relative to Aphrodite in our life. You know, it's the Aphrodite divinity that's coming to the night sky, taking us into the beautiful realm of love and romance and so on and so forth. That's the time to reignite those sorts of things. And again, because it's in Gemini, it can be a very blessed period relative to studying and learning and or teaching, speaking. You know, it depends who you are and what's going on in your life. It's getting dark outside, which is showing me that it's definitely time for me to go. I think I covered everything that I wanted to cover for today, at least. Yeah. Plus, I've run out of gas. As I said, I've still got a sinus infection, so I'm not feeling 100%. Okay. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope it was helpful, and reach out if you want to study with me, and reach out if you want a Venus Star Point reading. Don't forget, I've got a special going on in June for the month, for all of June. I'm going to give a special to most readings. So send me an email and we'll go from there. Okay, so many Venus star blessings. May the divine, mystical, nocturnal Aphrodite bring love into your life, even if it's just opening up your own heart center more for your own self-love. But it'd be nice actually to share that with somebody, wouldn't it? Because Venus is the archetype of sharing. So many blessings. Bye for now.